Thank you for joining us. You can keep your camera on, off, totally up to you. Just stay muted if you can. We're going to get through our 3 amazing panelists, and then we are going to open the floor to questions, but in the chat room. For those of you that don't know us, we are the Women in Leadership Foundation. My name is Kelly. I am the co-chair for Vancouver. Please look us up if you don't know us already. And again, welcome. I hope everyone's had a look at this year's theme and has been looking at content and posting. But if you haven't, there's an amazing website for International Women's Day. Lots of information there. Please go check it out and join the conversation. So we are going to quickly move forward through our speakers. I am very pleased to present our first speaker up, Elan Bailey. Her bio is amazing. Please do go check it out on the Eventbrite if you haven't already, because it might be tight to read this in the next minute or two. She has spoken at a few of our events, and we are thrilled to have her back. So I'm going to lead her through questions, but I will give her a chance to say hello first. Welcome, Elaine.
Hi, Kelly. Thanks so much. It's great to be here, and I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
Yay. Okay, so your first question is, what does this year's International Women's Day theme, Choose to Challenge, mean to you?
Well, I have to say, it kind of feels like 45 years has finally caught up with me. I feel like I came into the world challenging. But this year in particular, it's, I find myself, I've worked in tech and leadership development and organization development. And with everything that's going on in the world, I really, over the last 4 or 5 years, have just come to recognize that even though people see me as being from a marginalized community, I have power and privilege. And I've kind of just taken it for granted. I've been very self-directed, independent, made my way in the world, and never let any kind of, barriers sort of stop me. And now it really feels like a time to recognize that not everybody has that same path, and how to reach back, reach beside me, reach in front of me and above me. I mean, whichever metaphor you want to use to help people come forward. So first of all, personally, I'm a single mother. I have a young son who is now about to turn 19. He's an incredible human being. And, being here in Canada, I've been watching what's going on in the US, and it's really just tugged at my heart I've been fortunate. I've had days where, didn't know how I was going to put food in the fridge, but I'm looking at what's happening in the US. And one of the things that sort of kept me going is I thought, I've always had the smarts, I've always had the intellect and the backing, so that even if I go through a tough time, I know I'm going to be able to overcome it and I'll get back on my feet. And when I look at what's happening in the US, I realize there's a lot of people who, frontline workers, who will take years, if not decades, to recover from the setbacks they've experienced. And then others who were well on their way in their careers in the work world, who now through the pandemic are out of the work world, are at home, are teaching their kids, whatever is needed. So my Choose to Challenge this year is really stepping forward, looking at the things that I have going for me and how to use those, including getting involved for the first time in politics and, paying attention more to media and how narrative is one of the ways that we either feel a sense of ourselves being right and welcome in the world, or feeling unequal and like there isn't a place for us. So those are some of the pieces.
Amazing. I love the getting involved in politics, and thank you for sharing your personal story of being a single mom. That's amazing. My next question for you, we're getting a little, bigger here. What are the most effective ways to counteract the negative stereotypes of feminism, especially in the workplace?
Yeah, I had the pleasure of being on a call this morning with women from all over the world, and we were just sharing our stories of what we're doing in our lives and how we're helping ourselves and other women. And part of every person's story at some point led back to an inner journey where the work really, yes, we can make progress and move on larger systems, but as individuals, we are systems ourselves. And so I think that's the place of the highest point of leverage, is starting to undo some of the conditioning that we've experienced as women, including, imposter syndrome. And it's like, for some people that's genuine, and for others it's a conditioned experience of taking in social messages that we are somehow less than or inadequate, and internalizing those messages to the point where we've lost sight of our value and how to value ourselves in the world. So I would say the work can be done in organizations, and it starts with us. Part of what we discussed this morning was like looking at, oh gosh, you know what? I was successful in my career because I took on masculine stereotypes, and they weren't mine, but I took them on because that's what I thought I needed to do to be successful in a very competitive, tech space. So I think that's part of the undoing, is, finding a way to get quiet and get still with ourselves, whatever your methods are. It could be yoga, meditation, walking, running, journaling, having that self-reflection and introspection, so you start to get a sense of what's true for you. And the more that we show up authentically in organizations, the more we're modeling those healthy standards in the communities and circles and systems that we're a part of. So I would start internally.
That's great. And I love the authenticity piece. It's come up a lot in conversations I've had with, women over the past year. And I love that it's continuing to grow. Yeah. My next question is, what advice would you give to women struggling in those male-dominated industries that you very much know things about in the
Yeah, absolutely. And it kind of ties in with part of my previous response. Because sometimes our reaction to the systems that we're in is to figure out how to play the game and to figure out how to strategize. That's, I've never been successful at that. I'm not a political person. And, I always true to trying to show up as my authentic self, no matter what. I'm not always successful at that. But, that internal work, again, gives you a place to stand in terms of whatever it might be. It might be communication or conversations that you need to have. It might be advocating for yourself. It might be reaching out and finding those allies. But until we've done the internal work, we can either one, undervalue ourselves and not give ourselves the time and space to advocate for the things that we need in the world. Or when we are kind of coming from more of a strategic sense of like, how am I going to maneuver through these situations? We might be successful, but in the end, it means that we have to keep putting more energy into how to strategize our way forward, as opposed to showing up authentically. So again, I just keep coming back to that, finding that authentic center. And it's not easy, again, there's been so much external messaging that we've internalized, from our families to our partner to society to our the organizations we work in. Sometimes the work is just to figure out what is your true voice.
That's great. That is a lot of work all in itself. Absolutely. My next question: what have you found to be the most effective way to address gender bias and inequality in the workplace?
Yeah, this is a lot of the work I do as an organization development consultant. I now have the luxury, and I didn't always, but I now have the luxury of being able to work with organizations at the system level. So working with the executives in the organization and working on systems. So from that lens, we're able to start to sort of dismantle some of the ways that, even when you have an organization that has the best of intentions or strong values, living into those values is different than stating those values. And that's where a lot of organizations like, oh, right, this actually is, it's requiring us to show up in a way that's different than we might have expected. So a lot of the work I get to do there is working with, like, you can execute, you can start with the mission vision, you can have your values, the plan laid out. I do some work around having organizations assess their values. So they start to see across the organization at all levels, what are the values that we see as important? And it's not actually meant to be that we all have exactly the same values. It's more like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where you need key values at every stage. And when you weave those together, you get a strong, sustainable organization. So I have the opportunity to work with organizations in that way. And my tendency is not to go in and pick an issue like diversity, equity, inclusion, like gender bias, or gender equality, because then we get sort of myopic in our approach, and we take an issue-based approach. And then it's like, oh, suddenly there's a new group that we've been neglecting. Instead, if you come in with a human-centered approach, and what do we need to do as an organization for everybody to be effective, for everybody to thrive? And by the way, what is the business case for equity? Right? So if that's how organizations, and I tend to work with for-profit organizations, if that's their measure of success, then make the business case from an economic perspective. What is the bottom line of being a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive organization? So it's starting there, doing the work at a systems level, having people kind of address it from what are our values? And by the way, what do these values look like for different folks in the organization? And then I actually go one step further, and that's working with the areas of resistance. Instead of thinking that that's something that we have to overcome, one of the mentors that I follow is a guy named Robert Keegan, who talks about an immunity to change. And ultimately, it is that even when you have a commitment or values or something that you aspire to, there are those unconscious assumptions and biases that kick in. And it's not to just say, oh, bias is bad. It's start by declaring a commitment to something greater. And once you've declared a commitment to something greater, you now have a place where you can do sort of a gap analysis, right? Where you can say, this is what we aspire to, and yet this is what's showing up in our day-to-day, in our organization. And from there, you can start to work in that middle ground to find out, well, what is keeping the old world in place? For many of us, we have a conscious commitment and then an unconscious competing commitment. And it's like driving with one foot on the gas and one foot on the brake. And instead of making that wrong or bad, it's part of our human survival mechanism. Part of the work I do in systems and organizations is to start to surface that unconscious, and then figure out what's there, what actually feels threatening. On the one hand, we're committed. And on the other hand, this commitment feels like a bit of a threat because there's risk involved. And so then let's break down what that risk is. So that's some of the work I do around dismantling some of these old patterns.
Very powerful stuff. That's amazing. Final question as we wrap up in this short time. You talked about the different, putting the different layers and levels together. How do you turn that back to the leadership teams that are really driving it from the top? How do you help get the voice upwards?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, I'm now, again, I have the luxury, and I've done it in organizations, whatever level I'm at was the level I worked at, and now I have the luxury as an outside consultant that I just won't do the work if leadership isn't bought in. And so part of it is sometimes we're just one step ahead with leadership, where I'll do a session with leadership to figure out what's there, what's the commitment, what's in the way for them, unpack that, get that complete, and then go do it with the team. But it can be effective from the team up and from the team outward, from the front line back, again, whichever metaphor you want to use. And I'm just really grateful that at this stage in my career, I get to pick and choose. And so I will not work with an organization where it's not the executive level that is committed. And when they say committed, it's true that they may not actually know what that means, what that commitment is going to require of them. And that's okay. But I don't do the performative stuff, and I don't do lip service. If you're not willing to walk your talk, I'm not the consultant for you. So
That is fantastic. That motto is amazing. And that speaks volumes to every company you're working with too.
Right. Yeah.
That's amazing. Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you so much
Kelly.
again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great questions.
We're going to have some Q&A at the end. If everyone wants to look you up, they can look up Up-Level Leadership Academy and see some of your amazing work. Thanks again.
Thank you.
All right. On to our next speaker. We have Shannon Christensen, the founder and CEO of Mamas for Mamas. And welcome, Shannon.
Thank you. I'm just getting off mute.
Perfect. I have Shannon's amazing bio up here, but again, please Google her. You will find some amazing things. It's incredible what you can find online. We're gonna jump right in. First question for you is, what gender-specific challenges, stereotypes, or barriers have you had to overcome during your career?
Well, thank you for the question. It's a really interesting one, and it's many issues have presented to me, but I like to see them as opportunities to grow, honestly. And that's might be a little cheesy, but as a young woman, I was 27 years old when I started Mamas for Mamas. I had a master's degree, and I had done a lot of work in, gender-specific sexual assault trauma treatment. I was at the Elizabeth Fry Society, and I could just tell that there was this really dichotomous understanding of what it meant to have a gender-specific issue in the workplace. At Mamas for Mamas, I was often seen, I think, as inexperienced or perhaps unable to lead an organization and move away from, being a trauma counselor, which is a very safe role for a woman in today's world. It's the social services, it is helping others, it is within the confines of what I'm supposed to be doing. I felt that as I moved into more of a leadership role, I was questioned on whether or not I could or should actually be doing that. And a big piece of that was, well, what about the kids? Who's going to be with the children? And I kind of thought to myself, well, what do you mean? My husband is going to be with the children. He's their father. And there was a real deep dive that I had to do into my own understanding of what it meant to be a woman in a workplace that was largely run by men, and I don't mean in the nonprofit sector. I mean, in general, many executives are male. And I was starting to be the only female at the boardroom table. And I felt that I'd earned my place there. I continue to earn my place every time I show up. And I'm not intimidated, and I'm not afraid to ask questions. I think I was often really, putting myself in a position where I was constantly in the zone of proximal development. I was always pushing myself to be a little bit uncomfortable so that I could learn to be stronger and better in that role. And being a woman in and of itself was a major challenge for me. Being a leader of an organization that had gone from a small little grassroots nonprofit of moms helping moms to a giant national nonprofit organization that is now at the table with the United Ways and the Food Banks of Canada and these incredible, massive organizations that are 90% run by men. So I had to step into my power and ask myself how comfortable I was asking questions and asserting my own place at the table just by virtue of the fact that I had earned it. Imposter syndrome, very much, as Ilan had referred to, was a big piece that I had to overcome.
That's amazing. And asking the questions. And it's very powerful, again, how you said could and should, right?
Absolutely.
There's definitely a lot of women in the same place, right?
Yeah,
we're going to segue that into a piece of advice for women juggling between home and work, for moms, non-moms, both. What advice would you give to them?
I would give the advice to all of the mamas out there who are trying to juggle the professional and the personal, to ask for the help from your partner or from your friends. If you're a single mom and you've got a community of mamas that you can rely on, that you can depend on, utilize that support system. Because when we try to do this by ourselves, It's not, we don't get a medal or a badge for getting through this on our own. And honestly, it is something that we've been taught since the very beginning, that if we're independent, we are therefore successful. But interdependence breeds a very different kind of success. And it's one that's longer term. And it's one that doesn't lead to burnout as soon as you've reached that level of success. So I would say, you know, embrace the fact that you are going to have a different kind of lifestyle than if you were home full time. And that's okay. That's something to celebrate. You know, when you have the opportunity to move into the fullness of your life in a professional capacity, that's something that is no mama left behind, just as much as when we speak to it economically. You know, we speak to no mama left behind in the sense of, you know, we're going to make sure she has housing. We're going to make sure she's got food. We're going to make sure her kids have got shoes and clothes and everything they need. But when we speak at Mamas for Mamas, when we say there's no mama left behind, we mean that professionally, economically, and very much in terms of how we connect as women. So connect with the women in your life, connect with your partner, your mother, your father, whoever it is that gets you and understands why you're doing what you do. They're so proud of you and they want to support you. But if you don't ask, they'll think you're okay. And I just have to say, you know, my husband, I've been with him since I was 18 years old, and he has supported me in every single thing I do, whether it was getting my master's degree right after my dad passed away unexpectedly, whether it was choosing to have children, you know, sooner than we'd expected because of that. You know, it was just a real eye opener for me when I realized that other women didn't have that experience in their partner. And I encourage every single one of you to speak with your partner, whoever it is that is your support system, to let them know intrinsically where your passion comes from, because they won't be able to help but support you in that.
I love that, the support system. And yeah, don't be afraid. It's okay to ask, you know, outside what you think, you know, your normal group is. It'd be amazing who will show up for you when you have the courage to ask.
Absolutely.
People
and then
definitely
they'll ask you.
Surprise you.
Absolutely. Yeah, it takes a village to raise a child, and it takes a village to support a mama.
That is amazing. Next question. What are some of the steps that companies, employers could take to equal out the ground and improve the representation of women in, well, any industry?
I love it. Well, first of all, you know, I think that we need to just have, once again, that understanding that women have earned a space at the table, and that we have an exceptional capacity to multitask. And I think that something I saw on LinkedIn the other day really connected with me. And it was something like, if you paid a mother for every role she did, she'd be worth about $380,000 a year in everything that she's able to do on top of being a professional. So it's so important to remember that having women on your team, it doesn't just add to your, you know, ability to say that you're a diverse and inclusive organization. It adds to the productivity. You will never have a harder working individual than a mom who's trying to make sure that she's got a roof over the head of her children and food on the table. And I would say that one of the ways that I am super proud that Mamas for Mamas is encouraging that, we do hire majority women, but we also have men on our team. When it comes to supporting those women in coming to work and loving what they do and wanting to continue on in the workforce, we honor them as mothers first, and then we encourage them to be part of Mamas for Mamas. So as a result of not nickel and diming our mamas who are on our staff with, you know, time off or when their children is sick or anything like that, they won't nickel and dime us with their time, their productivity, and their energy. So it's really about recognizing women as the superpower heroes and everything else that they are. And when you're looking for the most productive person, find a mama and the job will get done. Or a papa, I will say that too. I'm not going to discriminate, but I've just had such an exceptional level of productivity and strong culture on our team because we honor these individuals as mothers and as women before we look at them as employees.
No, that's so amazing. It's true. Show up, you know, for your employees and what they need. And those needs are evolving and it's slowly starting to be recognized. Finally,
yeah,
you know, what they
show up for you.
Yeah, I love that. Now, just a simple question. We'll just, what does International Women's Day mean to you?
International Women's Day means to me Like my mom said when we were growing up, and she was a single mom of 5 kids, it's us against the world. As women, we are here. Get used to it. We are not here to take over. We are here to collaborate, not to compete. And I like to take the approach as women moving into society as a stronger force in professionalism and everything else that we're moving into as the mainstream. We're here to stay, but we want to work with you. We want to work with the men and the community that is accepting us for the roles that we're moving into. And Mamas for Mamas doesn't compete, we collaborate. I see the same in women. We are here to collaborate with the community. We're here to make sure that the agencies and the systems and the individuals recognize women for what their superpower is. And there are very, very, very many superpowers, but as women, I see us as connectors. And at the end of the day, International Women's Day means to me that we are connected, and even more so every day that we do these kinds of things.
Yeah, I love that statement, collaboration over competition any day just brings success, and no matter what you're applying it towards.
I like to think so.
Final question. How do we encourage the development of a work environment that is conductive not only to the proper treatment of women and their value, but giving them an opportunity to excel and be leaders in their community?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, I think ongoing professional training for our staff and the individuals who are part of an organization, giving them the opportunity to carve out that niche within the organization and really go for it. If they have a certain passion for a certain kind of a project that we don't necessarily have in our mandate, let's get some extra training on that. Let's look further into it and see if that's something we can incorporate into our values and our systems that just make the safety net of who we are as Mamas for Mamas stronger, deeper, and richer all the time.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Shannon. I encourage everyone to look at Mamas for Mamas and see where they can join the conversation or help. You're in Kelowna, so if anyone's local to there, but anywhere you can help, right?
Yeah, we've got 62 branches across Canada, so you can basically find a Mamas for Mamas anywhere.
62, that's amazing. What a milestone. And I hope to hear about next year's growth. Maybe we can talk again.
Oh, we will.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. All right, moving on to our third and final speaker of the panel. We have Dr. Marina Adshade. We are thrilled to have another powerful speaker, and I will leave the floor to you to say hello before we get started.
So can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. I just want to start by just saying how awed I am by the previous speakers. Like, I feel very privileged to be on the panel with Ilan and Shannon. Thank you so much for everything that you do. I feel like a little emotional about that. And, you know, International Women's Day really is, I think, first and foremost about celebrating the work that women do. And, you know, I think that if anything, if you do one thing today, is just to thank the women around you and show some appreciation for it. It's amazing. We are surrounded by amazing women. So thank you so much for having me here.
I love that. We are surrounded by amazing women. It's great. All right. We're going to jump right into some questions. We're going to start with, what advice would you give to your 20-year-old self?
So I have a PhD now, and I'm a professor at UBC, but, you know, I didn't finish high school. I dropped out of high school. I married early, and I had my daughter. And, you know, in my 20s, I really thought that I was going to be a housewife. That was my plan for my life. And it didn't work out. And then I started my undergrad when I was 27. And then 4 years later, I started my PhD. And when I started my PhD, I was 6 months pregnant and I was a single parent, which seems to be a bit of a theme on this panel. You know, I think that when I look back at my life, I regret none of these things because all of these things have made me resilient, like incredibly resilient. And I think if there's one thing that really serves women, especially women in particular of positions of leadership, is to have resilience, right? To learn that you can be knocked down and pick yourself up. So I'm not sure that I would tell my 20-year-old self to change anything. I think I might tell her that one day a man will offer her something called Bitcoin for $20 and she's going to think it's a lot of money, but she should still buy it. But that's pretty much it. I really regret none of these things.
That's amazing. Gonna offer you some Bitcoin.
$20.
Yes, because who knew, right?
Who knew?
Moving back to the theme of International Women's Day, what does this year's Choose to Challenge theme mean to you?
Well, you know, I think that it's a great theme for this year because it has been a particularly challenging year for women. I think that what the last 12 months has done is it's shown us how kind of structural inequalities have made women particularly vulnerable in a situation like we've been with the COVID crisis and with the accompanying economic crisis. So for me, I think that Choose to Challenge, you know, I think the best approach to it is say, you know, we're at a point in history where I think we get to choose how we move forward. And while there's a lot of conversation about like the return to normal and when will we return to normal, I think that everybody should be asking ourselves, what do we really want? And do we want to return to the way that things were before? Or do we want to take this as an opportunity to learn from the how difficult this crisis has been for women and whether or not we want to change things moving forward? So for me, I think it's really kind of a more future looking perspective on challenging the structural inequalities that have made it so that women were far more likely to lose their jobs, why so many women have had to leave the workforce, the economic hardship that women have been particularly experiencing. What do we want to do to make sure that we don't have these problems in the future?
No, that's great. It has been quite the year. So the theme would have to be a really strong theme, I feel, to propel us into 2021. My next question to you is, how do you succeed in a male-dominated environment?
Yeah, so I would just want to amplify Elaine's comments on male-dominated environments because they're entirely consistent with my own. The idea that, you know, I think that especially for a woman my age, I've spent so much of my life being fed this narrative that in order for women to be successful in a male-dominated industry, or actually really in any industry, that the best approach is to behave like men. You know, and I think this narrative still being perpetuated in many spaces. But you know, one thing I can say, and I can add to Elaine's previous comments, is, you know, researchers, academic economists have actually looked at these questions. And the one thing that we find consistently, and many of you already know this to be true, is that when women behave like men, they do not get the same outcomes as men, right? For example, there is this narrative that women don't ask for raises and they don't ask for promotions. That's actually not true. They just don't get them when they ask, or even when they ask, actually is viewed as like a negative quality. So I think that, like, you know, in order to be successful in a male dominated space or in any space, I think that people really do need to work to be their authentic selves. I don't think that this is a matter of behaving like men. And I think that I understand that there's challenges with this because we are subject to a culture that rewards a lot of kind of male traits. But I see that shifting now, right? And I think that there is a lot of potential for kind of cultural change, corporate cultural change that moves away from those male appreciation of those male behaviors and greater appreciation, not just for female behaviors, but diverse perspectives, right? Because if we really value diversity in our world, we have to allow people to speak to their own voices. Diversity is not everyone fitting into a particular mold of how we expect people to behave. So I think that with male dominated fields, I think that this is where we have a lot of space to grow.
Oh, absolutely. And I love how you address that the women are asking for the raises and standing up. It's just now getting the same response.
Well, I think part of the issue here is that a lot of times when we look about why, there's so few women in the C-suite, or why there's few women in position of leaderships, we're very, very quick to blame women for that situation. And I think that we're kind of done. I'm done that. I think we're like a little tired of that, because there's so many women around us who are not standing on the sidelines. And so I think that that's really important to shift our narrative and think less about the behavior of individual women and more about cultural change.
It's great. Great that you spoke of culture. We're going to go into a culture question. Given that culture is not entirely set at the company level, is there anything we can do or be doing in our daily lives to improve gender equality and reduce bias?
Yeah, so first of all, I think that everybody needs to recognize, not you here, but just people in general, need to recognize that by constantly rewarding behaviors that are about competition over teamwork, rewarding behaviors of working independently and not asking for help, and a lot of qualities that we kind of associate with men, we're actually creating a very negative workplace, not just for women, but we're actually creating a negative workplace for everyone, because in 2021, especially in workplaces that have lots of technology, it's not really particularly the right culture for productivity. And so we would all be served by cultural change. But I think that, and I'd like to kind of bring back to something that Alan said earlier that I think is really, really important, is that we need more women to be involved in politics. I really genuinely believe that moving into 2021, I think that we've seen in the last year how well countries have done that had female leadership. And so I think that this is what I would encourage. And so even if you're not a woman who wants to run, first of all, if you're a woman who wants to run for political office, you're amazing and you should pursue that dream, and you should surround yourself with people who will support that as a goal, because we absolutely need you in this city and in this province and this country to be involved. But there's other ways to be involved in politics as well. And so that's, I think, something that I would really, really like to see, because I think that this is a place where in Canada, we actually think that we're doing well with women in political leadership. We're actually really falling behind other countries. And so I think there we have a lot of space to grow. So I think that type of shifts, see more women running for office, more women running the country, in the city, in the province, I think would make a huge difference.
Apologies. Working from home means sometimes the dogs are barking.
I actually also have a puppy, and I was really going to warn you that she might actually come in for a visit at some point, but so far she's been pretty good.
Okay. Next question. What are some steps that companies, employers could take to equal out the ground and improve the representation of women?
So I think that it goes back to these ideas of how we organize ourselves. So I gave a talk 2 years ago at the Bank of Canada, which was funny because it was like, I was invited to come speak at the Bank of Canada as part of a Pride event that they had. And they were like, oh, it's going to be like 13, 14 people at the Bank of Canada who are going to hear you speak about. I told them I wanted to talk about masculinity, which made them a little bit nervous. And then I went to speak, and there was like 70 people, including the entire board of governors of the Bank of Canada and the governor of the Bank of Canada, which I was not expecting. And I'll tell you what I told them is that I think that workplaces really need to think about what type of behaviors they reward, right? People behave in ways in workplaces that are, toxic. I'm just going to say the word toxic, because those behaviors are rewarded. Workplaces are set up with it because they create incentives for people to behave that way. The Bank of Canada, for example, the managers often work through the weekends. They work long hours. And I said to them in that meeting that when you have this idea that everybody has to work through the weekend, you discourage women from participating. You create barriers, even though you as an organization, Bank of Canada is amazing. They've worked very hard to raise women up through the ranks. If you do not create a culture in which other behaviors are incentivized, you're never going to achieve that goal. So I think that's what workplaces really need to do is ask themselves, what makes a worker productive, like really productive? And then create incentives for that productivity, and recognizing that there is a diversity in skills, and that the diversity in skills makes the entire workplace more productive. So if that makes any sense.
It definitely makes sense. And it's so true. They're setting up undesirables when they put out things that aren't going to work for, working mom's life, or just anyone whose life is like that. They are, making it difficult from the start. So start to call that out.
Yeah. I think that it's baby steps. And also too, and I think I said this before, but I can't stress this enough. It's just like these workplace behaviors that are incentivized, they're not good for anyone. They're not good for men. They're definitely not good for men of color, because just like women, men of color are not treated the same way when they behave the same way as white men. And so really all entire workplaces can improve when we start identifying the problems and eliminating them. There are benefits to everyone, and there are benefits to the bottom line, because, in 2021, what we really need in workplaces is teamwork and cooperation. And so we need to kind of look at our old ways and see how we can improve.
Yes, there is room for improvement, but I slowly start to see it happening, and the conversations just keep growing. So I guess that's the good news. Do you feel, based on the current level of growth in these conversations, that by this time next year, we're going to be a giant step ahead, or a baby step ahead, or how do you think we're doing?
I think that we will be a baby step ahead, because there's a fundamental underlying problem that needs to be addressed in our society before any of these other issues can be fully resolved. And that's the issue of caregiving, and how much caregiving responsibilities are placed on women, caring for their own children, caring for their partners, caring for their parents, and wider community caregiving that we do. And until we address those issues, I think that it's going to be very hard for us to make progress. And I also think that the progress will be slow. And I like to consider myself an optimist, so this kind of makes I feel a little bit badly about saying it's going to take a long time, but we really need to address them with our daughters and also with our sons. I mean, we really need to stop sending the message to our daughters that they need to choose careers or organize their work lives in a way that makes it possible to engage in like as much caregiving as we have. In British Columbia, more than half of women work in 4 industries: healthcare, education, retail services, and food services. And they work in those occupations because they are occupations that make it easy for women to balance family and work. Until we have more support and caregiving, I think this will continue to make it very difficult for women to get equality.
That is extremely true. I'm personally hoping that the small positive out of the pandemic is our work from home, how vastly that's grown, and the small bits of opportunity that will open from that, that work schedules don't necessarily have to be 9 to 5. That is, you know, the only strict option. There aren't doors to be flexible anymore.
Yeah, actually, I hope the one positive thing that comes out of COVID too is that employers start thinking about their employees' whole lives. You know, thinking about things like, how does my employee get to work? Who does she live with? What are her other obligations? Because these are things they've had to think about with COVID, especially when we're thinking about transmission of disease. Maybe when this is all over, we can continue to think about our employees this way, and give employees the flexibility to do their jobs well. And you know, Shannon said this about giving people flexibility and that making them more productive. And I think that this is really, really key. So I just want to thank her for that comment, because I think it's really important.
No, that's fantastic. And thank you for your honesty. It is wonderful. And I personally can't wait to read your book. For those who can sort of see it up there on the screen when we did your bio, Dollars and Sex, How Economics Influences Sex and Love. Very exciting. It's on my list. And we are going to move to, well, open Q&A, but through the chat, please. If anyone has any questions for any of our 3 amazing speakers, please pop over to the chat, put them in. They can be an open or they can be a specific question. I am happy to take both. There is an old question that was when we were talking that's in here. Gender bias exists. Have you personally experienced this, and how did you handle the situation? I'm not positive to who that was for, but if any of our speakers would like to take that. Have you personally experienced gender bias, and how did you handle it?
I can respond, and my response may not be very satisfying for folks, because I'm someone who like look at the intersections here, right? I'm a woman, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a single mother, I'm a Black woman, like check, you know, and yet I don't walk through the world looking for evidence of how I am being marginalized, if I can say it that way. I know that it exists. I'm sure I've experienced it. And yet I have the power of interpreting my experiences in a way that empowers me or that debilitates me. And so I've always chosen to write my own narrative about what empowers me. So I'm sure I've experienced it, but I couldn't give you stories of how I've experienced it, because I've just not let it become part of my narrative or what defines how I move through the world.
Amazing.
I could speak to it briefly, and just, you know, on the same lines as Ilan, I experience it all the time in my world where, you know, what are your qualifications is kind of a big question I'm asked all the time. And I always just try and take it as an opportunity to educate with polite power. You know, I had Debbie Scarborough from South Okanagan Women in Need Society tell me that one time. She said, and she's like a coroner and a firefighter, but she's also a caregiver. And she had this way of explaining to me, people are going to challenge you day in and day out because you're a woman. Don't let them. Don't take it like that. Don't take it personally. Engage with polite power and just, you know, use it as an opportunity to educate. Often, she said, people just don't really understand how ignorant they're being in the way they approach situations. And so it's really up to us to take it as an opportunity rather than to say, you know, how dare you? Like, I've earned my place. And yeah, okay, I feel that and it comes up inside of me. But I also say to myself, you know what? This poor guy has no idea. You know, I'm going to give him the chance to be better. I'm going to give him the chance and the skills and the tools to know how to approach the women in his world. So he's not going to be perceived like that you know, hyper masculine, need to dominate in order to feel good enough kind of man. Like, it is our chance to teach them now, when they give us that opportunity. So I take it as a good thing, usually.
I love that. Polite.
Polite power.
Polite power. Yes, absolutely. All right. Marina, did you want to answer as well before we move on, or you're good?
You know what? I think I'm good. I don't want to take up time because I think both of those answers are excellent. I think one of the things I've been quite lucky in is that I'm actually very good at ignoring a lot of the, you know, the problem. I've spent most of my life ignoring a lot of it. One of the things that I've become harder to ignore as I've gotten older is the kind of intersectional discrimination of being an older woman. I'm not old, but I'm in my 50s, but just being a middle-aged woman, it's become more and more apparent over time, particularly since I do work in a very technical field. That's really taken me by surprise, is the idea that because I'm over the age of 50 that I, can't even manage very, very simple technical tasks. And so I actually kind of like to shine a light on that, because I think one of the things that we have, challenges we have as a country in general, is dealing with discrimination against older women. If you're over the age of 50 in 2021, you're the first generation of women who went to university at higher rates than men. You're the first generation of women who didn't have big interruptions to your workplace your work life for taking care of children. Older women in this country have a huge amount to offer employers and communities. And I think that we need to address the way that we approach older women and participation of older women in our work lives, in our communities.
That's amazing.
I just have to say, Kelly, it is so, I am restraining myself, and I just broke my word here to keep, every time Dr. Marina talks, I want to just get on have a conversation with her. So I keep trying to hold back, but she's bringing up some really good points.
Yes. I feel like we could definitely go for a few hours here. There's so many conversations that have just started, but
I'm going to interrupt too, by the way, and say that I did turn off my mic when Alan was speaking. And I said to my daughter, who's come upstairs to listen, I'm slightly obsessed with this woman. So I think we should actually, we could have a lot to talk about afterwards.
I love it. Keep the conversation going. Absolutely. Okay, next question. How do you overcome when your idea is not listened to and then reiterated by a man and is proven as a fabulous idea?
Where's Shannon? I'm giving Shannon the eye.
Oh man, that's a good one.
Who wants to go?
Where do you even start? Oh man, going back to collaboration over competition, I really try and take it as an opportunity to be kind rather than be right, because even though they might need that, I don't need to be right. If I've come up with a great idea, I just want to see it happen. I want to see the action take place. And if it means that, Joe Schmo from the agency next door has decided he's going to take over the, mental health initiative that Mamas is launching, or, a different way of doing things, I like to see it as a compliment, because we are breaking down the status quo. We're breaking down the systems that are keeping women and children in poverty. And if anyone wants to take that and run with it, I'm just grateful, because I don't care who gets the credit. I care who gets the help. So I just see it as a win regardless. And yeah, sure, it pisses me off sometimes, but at the end of the day, if you don't get a little jazzed about things, you're not going to be willing to change them. So again, take it as an opportunity to further the work, not the ego, would be my piece on that.
I love that. I want to build on it. I'm someone, again, checking these boxes. I tend not to lose a lot of sleep over microaggressions. I know that they need to be worked out over time and broken down over time. But if I think about the value of my time and my energy, that's not a place I actually want to spend fighting all of those mini battles. I know they add up to significant pain and trauma. It's just not where I choose to put my energy. But to Shannon's point, there will be times. So there's the time when it's like, you know what, it's okay. It doesn't matter in this case. And simultaneously do the work of like surrounding yourself with a crew. People who I had the luxury of speaking on someone's stage earlier, in December. And I'm very comfortable doing talks, speaking in front of hundreds or even thousands of people. But this woman not only shared her platform with me, she spent the time to help me develop my message so that it would land over there for other folks. And it was the most gracious gift that she could give me. And it's gone on, that talk has gone on to be better and better through that collaboration. So Cameron, I would say surround yourself with folks who you can do some role playing, you can do some coaching, work with a coach, but keep working on how do I strengthen my voice? Because there's going to be times when you're like, you know what, this is not a hill I'm going to die on. It doesn't matter. And there are going to be other times when it's like, you know what, this is really important to me. And I want to be able to stand firm and to continue to stand up for the idea if I feel like I'm not being heard. And not only for you, but to model that for the other women around the table or who might not be in the room. So I think you can do both. I think there's times when you're like, you know what, in this case, maybe it doesn't matter. Other times where you might pull the person aside or pull the person aside who's facilitating the meeting. When I'm facilitating meetings, I don't stand for that. Everybody's seen and heard. And I make sure I connect the dots so that I come back to the person who shared it. That's another way that you can have allies and advocates on your side. But the other piece is that internal piece where you surround yourself with some good people who can help you continue to work and develop your message and own your value. Keep owning your value and doing that work. Because sometimes part of it is we feel like we're not valued in the environment. And every time I've had that message in my career where I've thought I'm not valued in the environment, inevitably it always comes back to some point where I'm not fully valuing myself.
That's wonderful. Does Marina want to chime in our final minutes to this, or?
I would rather if we could, if there's another question and there's time for that, I think that
I don't have any other questions yet. We have a very quiet group here.
I think that it's a quiet group. It's because there's just been so much information here.
No, absolutely.
To take away and digest. I hope that this video, the recordings can be available, because I'd really like to watch this again, because I think that there's so much information to mull over, as we go about the rest of our days. So I have nothing to add, just simply to say thank you to everybody for their thoughts.
Yes, the recording will be available. I will definitely watch it back because there was some very powerful statements. I said it a few times, used the same words because there really was a lot. So we are thrilled that you all gave us your incredibly valuable time and shared all those powerful statements, and can inspire us to keep the conversation going, because there is a lot. There is a lot here. If anyone has any final thoughts, feel free to throw them out now as we wrap up and let people get back to their work days.
I just want to say thank you for having me. I'm incredibly humbled to be alongside these two very powerful women, and everybody here. I'm very grateful, and I'm excited to be having these conversations as part of, our everyday, not just today. So thank you.
I'll echo that. And I just want to make sure that we thank you, Kelly, for hosting the conversation and moderating. And I know there are others working with you behind the scenes. I think there was Rachel and Dana, I hope I'm saying your name right, and others, Maureen. So thank you to all those who do this wonderful work behind the scenes and create this platform for us. And thank you to my co-panelists.
Thank you.
That's amazing. Yes. Thank you. We are, well, always just thrilled to have everybody. Okay. We do have another International Women's Day week event coming up. If anyone wants to go to our website, you can RSVP for that. It's with Amazon. All the details are there. My slide is not coming up for it. But thank you again to everyone, especially our speakers. And this will be available online if anyone wants to watch it back. Have a wonderful International Women's Day. And again, keep the conversation going, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.